Randy Giveans, Jefferies Senior VP of Maritime Shipping Equity Research, joining us now. Randy, the big container lines are thinking about it. Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd are starting to talk about maybe starting to divert some of their cargoes. Can you just give me a sense of the disruption that is being caused here? 237 vessels are now in the queue. Presumably that's going to take out a lot of capacity. That's going to have a huge impact on rates.
Absolutely, Guy. You hit the nail on the head, right? And this is certainly unprecedented to see a blockage of this extent in such a major artery, right? The Suez Canal, we're talking 10 to 12% of world trade goes through this little choke point. So with that, when you have a blockage like this for even a couple of days, which could turn out to a couple of weeks, massive ramifications across all sectors, right? As you talked about containers, container ships, that market is extremely tight. We've seen congestion in China. We've seen it off the west coast of California. We've seen it down here in Houston, Texas. We see it obviously now around the Suez Canal.
Right.
So with that, these liner companies like Maersk, like Zim, are certainly going to have better and better rates. And the container ship owners like Danaos, Global Ship Lease, they're going to be charging more and more because now there's less vessels available, fewer vessels available for these charters. And we've seen this before when you've had different attacks on ships or you've had big weather disruptions. What happens is this dislocation causes charterers to scramble for tonnage. So the longer this persists, be it a few days, much less a few weeks, the more dislocation in trade. And you're going to see a lot of vessels, getting rerouted, going around South Africa and then up to Europe instead of trying to cut through the shortcut of the Suez Canal.
So can you put a dollar figure on that, Randy? I mean, how much are we talking in terms of how much freight rates could rise?
Yeah, so from a container rate perspective, right, that's on a single TEU, a 20-foot equivalent unit. You see one of those on the back of an 18-wheeler. So to put this in context, this ship has 20,000 of those individual TEUs on board, right? So the rates for those are already at record highs, $2,500 for a TEU. So you could certainly see that going up to 28, maybe even 29, $3,000 a TEU. On the shipping side, rates have climbed pretty dramatically over the last 6 months. And even now at $40,000 a day, if you're saying, well, now you have to go another 15 days around South Africa, that's $600,000 for just that single voyage, right? So pretty big numbers here for the owners as well as the container liners.
Randy, what's in these containers, do you think? I'm genuinely asking this question because I'm curious. Where is this stuff coming from? Which routes kind of bottleneck into the Suez? Because I'm wondering what we're going to see in terms of shortages in a few weeks' time. There is going to be some inventory in Europe. What kind of inventory are we going to see? Where are we going to see shortages? I'm genuinely asking the question, what do you think is in these containers?
That's a great question. With 20,000 TEUs, literally anything and everything, right? So all of this cargo is coming from Asia, either Taiwan or the Philippines, China, right? Loading and heading into Rotterdam. It was going into Northwest Europe. And then from there, obviously goes on throughout Western Europe. But it's everything from dishwashers to furniture to computer chips, electronics, clothes, right? It's a wide array of products. And you're going to see inventory levels are already relatively low just from the whole explosion.
Randy, we've already got a chip shortage that is basically shuttering auto plants. Are we going to see problems, similar problems in other areas?
Exactly. Auto manufacturers and others saying, well, if we don't have the supplied goods, the inputs, we have to shut down these factories and manufacturing plants. That's why it's a hard balance. Do you wait it out and hope the Suez Canal gets reopened in a few days? Or do you say, you know what, we're not going to risk it. We're going around South Africa and we're going to take the extra, like I said, 15 days. So it's going to be interesting to see how these importers decide to go about the wait.
Yeah, and Randy, you mentioned something earlier, and I think it is important context that we have to keep in mind that this situation is happening on top of what was already a very tight market, and we already were facing something like a freight crisis. Even once this situation is resolved, what does the picture look like going forward? How long is the market going to stay this tight?
Sure, that is a great question, right? We certainly see the tightness lasting for at least the next 3 to 5 months, right? Obviously, you're still starting to see a reopening trade happen. Vaccines are getting rolled out. People are going to start traveling more and spending more dollars, right, on going out to eat, going to sporting events, concerts, travel, and maybe fewer dollars on, well, let's just get some more furniture and some more clothes and go on Amazon shopping spree. That said, with inventory levels where they are, very low, with the supply of containers, of container ships, very low, demand only has to go up maybe 4 or 5%, which is a pretty low hurdle to keep rates at these pretty high levels, right? So will they stay at these record levels all year? Of course not. But will they be much higher than what we saw in 2020, 2019, 2018? Absolutely.
Yeah. Randy, there was a story on the terminal which seemed to get a lot of traction, excuse the pun, toilet paper shortages starting to potentially become a problem here, because the class of ships, which I think is called a break bulk, is starting to be impacted by what we're seeing in the container line. So the pulp that is used for toilet paper is going to be in short supply because the freight rates and the availability is starting to bleed out from the container lines into other classes. To what extent, how big a problem is this?
Yep, it is certainly, as I mentioned, widespread, right, contagion effects, right? And there's a lot of collateral damage trickling down to toilet paper, consumer goods. Now, I don't want to panic and freak people out and see this run Costco and loading up on toilet paper today. So I don't want to get too, but there's certainly going to be a shortage of all of these essential goods, right? Now, again, I don't think it persists months. You know, it will take a few days, if not weeks, as I mentioned, to offload some of the cargo, to empty the fuel, to move this 20,000 TEU vessel, Empire State Building, out of this embankment. But again, there's a little bit of inventory. There is some slack. There are alternative routes you can take. So I don't see this persisting months down the road. But for a few days and weeks, it's going to get a little stressful, especially for, you know, procurement departments.
So do you not expect there to be any real inflationary impact of this? I think even Jerome Powell in his testimony on Capitol Hill fielded a question about the situation in the Suez Canal yesterday, just whether or not it's going to lead to higher prices of goods. Do you not expect that to happen?
Yes, but I don't think it's a dramatic increase unless there is some, you know, real infrastructure damage and they have to shut down the Suez Canal for repairs and maintenance. And again, it lasts months, right? For a few days and weeks, you'll see a blip, right? You'll see some inflationary tick-ups, but we've seen that for quite some time, and we're going to see that for other reasons. This is just adding a little fuel to that fire. But again, all cargoes, right? Tanker rates have been pretty weak recently. However, this kind of shows how tight that market truly is when you have an event like this that's just causing a couple days of disruption. Now charters are scrambling for tonnage. And even tanker rates like Euronav, International Seaways, the rates that they're able to charge their owners, those are going up too. So it is widespread. Everything's being impacted by this. So time will tell. Hopefully they can get this thing cleared up soon.
Randy, I remember trying to get to the reopening of the Suez when they widened it. I ended up getting stuck in the Sinai for many, many reasons. But it was a really big deal for the Egyptians that they had widened the canal. This is a critical piece of infrastructure here, and it causes major problems. As you say, it doesn't happen very often, but these ships are getting bigger and bigger, and the pilots are obviously struggling to navigate. Is there anything that can be done on the infrastructure front, do you think? Do you hear any talk about that?
Yeah, the two great points there. You know, the widening of the canal, we saw the same thing in Panama back in 2016, right? But the widening canal has helped. And now people are saying, well, with global trade continuing to grow, these ships are getting bigger and bigger. These 20,000 TEU vessels weren't around a few years ago, right? So the size of the vessels have certainly expanded, and also the speeds. Everyone's saying, hey, I don't want to wait 2 weeks for that new crib. I want it tomorrow, right? So all these container ships, every cargo is just going full steam ahead. And that as well is causing a little more traffic, a little more jams when speeds are going up, sizes of ships are going up. So we think there will eventually, right, if it's not this year, maybe in the coming years, be some kind of a global speed limit on the seas, and especially through these canals, like the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal, some of these vital choke points, right? And then as for the size of ships, infrastructure is already a constraint because these ships can only fit through a handful of ports and can barely fit through some of these canals. So we do think there is a limit for how big these ships can be. And events like this are certainly kind of causing some additional concern to build and to maybe even expand the size of these ships. But it has been a problem in other incidents. And obviously something like this is certainly impacting that as well.